The company that invented cheap, disposable, trend-chasing fashion just got killed by cheaper, more disposable, faster, trend-chasing fashion. Forever 21 started with $11,000 and a gas station attendant's hunch. Within 2 decades, it had 800 stores, $4 billion in sales, and 2 immigrant founders worth nearly $6 billion. They helped invent the entire fast fashion playbook. So how did the company that wrote the rule book end up filing for bankruptcy twice in 6 years, blaming 2 APPS that beat them at their own game? It was 1981, and a young couple named Do Won and Jin Suk Chang stepped off a plane in Los Angeles carrying almost nothing. They came from South Korea, chasing the same thing millions of immigrants before them had chased. They barely spoke English. They had no college degrees. What they had was a willingness to work that bordered on punishing. Do Won took whatever jobs he could find around Los Angeles. He pumped gas at a service station. He cleaned floors as a janitor. He washed dishes in a coffee shop. Jin Suk worked as a hairdresser. Between them, over 3 grinding years, they saved about $11,000. And then Do Won noticed something while standing at that gas station pump in Los Angeles. The customers who pulled up in the nicest cars, the ones who clearly had money, kept turning out to be people in the clothing business. He filed that detail away. In 1984, the Changs took their entire life savings and opened a tiny store in the Highland Park neighborhood of Los Angeles. 900 square feet, about the size of a small apartment. They called it Fashion 21. That first year, that little shop pulled in $700,000 in sales. Jin Suk, it turned out, had an instinct for spotting which styles were about to take off and getting cheap versions onto the racks fast. The local Korean-American community came first, then everyone else followed. And that wasn't even the part that would change retail forever. Because what the Changs had stumbled into wasn't just a successful store, it was a formula. The formula was simple to describe and brutal to compete against. Watch what's trending. Copy it fast, make it cheap, sell it in enormous volume at razor-thin margins, then do it all again next week before the trend cools. Walk into a Fashion 21, soon rebranded Forever 21, and the clothes on the wall felt like whatever you'd seen on a celebrity 2 weeks earlier, except you could actually afford it on a teenager's budget. That was the magic trick. Runway looks at mall prices. Through the 1990s and into the 2000s, Forever 21 exploded across American shopping malls. The stores got bigger and bigger, some of them sprawling across multiple floors, neon-lit packed wall to wall, with the bright yellow shopping bags that became a fixture of mall culture. For a whole generation of young women especially, a trip to the mall meant a trip to Forever 21. It became the place you went for a last-minute outfit, a cheap haul, a Friday night look that cost less than dinner. By its peak, the numbers were staggering. More than 800 stores, operations stretching across 57 countries, around $4 billion in annual sales flowing through those bright yellow bags. And Do Won and Jin Suk Chang, the couple who had arrived with $11,000 and almost no English, were now worth close to $6 billion. They had built one of the great American immigrant success stories, one cheap t-shirt at a time. But the same instinct that built Forever 21, the relentless push to open more, bigger everywhere, was about to turn into the thing that broke it. To understand how big the bet on physical space really got, look at the stores themselves. The average Forever 21 location ran around 38,000 square feet. But some went far beyond that. The Times Square store in New York City sprawled across roughly 91,000 square feet. One location in Las Vegas reached an astonishing 127,000 square feet. These weren't shops, they were warehouses of clothing, and every single one carried enormous rent, lighting bills, and staffing costs. The company kept signing leases on these giants right as the ground was shifting underneath the entire retail industry. Shoppers were drifting away from malls. The foot traffic those huge stores depended on started to thin out year after year, and more of those shoppers were doing something Forever 21 wasn't built for. They were buying online. The overseas push made it worse. In 2005, Forever 21 had just 7 international stores. A decade later, it had more than 260. The problem was that the company charged into foreign markets without really understanding them. By 2015, most of those international locations weren't even profitable. Stores across Canada, Europe, and Asia were collectively bleeding around $10 million every single month. Then there was the distraction. In 2017, instead of fixing its core clothing business, Forever 21 launched a beauty chain called Riley Rose, opening more than 100 locations selling cosmetics and Korean skincare. It became a money pit. The company was pouring energy into expansion at the exact moment its main business was losing steam. As Do-won Chang later admitted, they took their eyes off the ball and lost their market position. The numbers told the story. Sales slid from a peak of around $4.4 billion in 2016 down to roughly $3.1 billion by 2019. Meanwhile, the total annual cost just to occupy all those stores had ballooned to around $450 million a year. Forever 21 was paying rent on acres of retail floor at the exact moment fewer people were walking through the doors. The trend spotting machine that nailed every fashion cycle had completely misread the biggest trend of all, which was where people actually wanted to shop. In 2019, it caught up with them. Forever 21 filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy for the first time. The company shut down around 200 stores and closed its Riley Rose beauty venture entirely. The Changs quietly dropped off the billionaire lists they had spent decades climbing onto. For a brand that had felt unstoppable, it was a stunning fall. And most people watching assumed that was the end of the story. It wasn't. Not yet. Because Forever 21 got a lifeline. A group of buyers stepped in and purchased the company out of bankruptcy for $81 million. The buyers were a consortium, the brand management firm Authentic Brands Group, alongside 2 of the biggest mall landlords in America, Simon Property Group and Brookfield. On paper, it made sense. The landlords had a direct interest in keeping a mall anchor alive, and the brand still had real recognition. And for a little while, it actually worked. With fresh capital and a slimmed-down fleet of stores, Forever 21 stabilized. In its 2021 fiscal year, the company generated around $2 billion in revenue and a healthy $165 million in earnings. The patient was off the floor and walking again. If the story had ended there, this would be a comeback video. If you're finding this breakdown interesting, take a second to subscribe. I dig into a different business rise and collapse every week, and the next ones get wild. So Forever 21 had clawed its way back to $2 billion in revenue and looked stable. But while the company was congratulating itself on surviving, something else was quietly being built on the other side of the world, and it was about to make everything Forever 21 had figured out look slow and expensive. Enter Shein and Temu, 2 online-first retailers founded with deep ties to China that took Forever 21's entire playbook and ran it at a speed Forever 21 physically could not match. Forget designing for the season. Shein could go from a trend to a product listing in days, pumping out thousands of new styles at prices that made even Forever 21 look expensive. There were no mall leases, no giant stores to heat and staff, just an app, a warehouse, and a fire hose of impossibly cheap clothing shipped straight to your door. But the speed wasn't even the deadliest part. The deadliest part was a piece of trade law most shoppers have never heard of called the de minimis exemption. Here's how it worked. Under that rule, packages shipped into the United States valued under $800 could enter the country duty-free with far less customs scrutiny. Now think about who that helps. If you're an online retailer mailing a $19 dress directly from an overseas warehouse to a customer's house, that package sails in under the limit. No import duties, almost no friction. But if you're Forever 21, importing huge quantities of product to stock warehouses and physical stores across America, you're paying duties and tariffs on all of it. Same kind of clothing, wildly different costs to get it onto a customer. In the company's own bankruptcy filings, a Forever 21 restructuring officer said the business was materially and negatively impacted by Shein and Temu's use of that exemption, which undercut Forever 21 on both price and margin. Read that again. The company that built an empire on undercutting everyone else on price had finally met someone who could undercut them. The copier got copied, the discounter got out-discounted. And here's where it gets almost tragic. Forever 21 understood the threat. In 2023, instead of just fighting Shein, it actually climbed into bed with it. The partnership went further than most people realize. Shein took a minority ownership stake in the company that operated Forever 21, and in return, that operator took a stake in Shein. Forever 21 even let shoppers return their Shein orders at Forever 21 stores. Think about what that means for a moment. The brand was now helping customers pick up and return products from the exact competitor that was bleeding it dry. The company also pushed the US government to close the de minimis loophole. None of it worked. The partnership didn't stop the losses, and the exemption stayed wide open. By the end, one of the companies slowly killing Forever 21 literally owned a piece of it. The man who led the original buyout, Authentic Brands chief executive Jamie Salter, would later call the whole Forever 21 deal the biggest mistake of his career. The numbers tell you how bad it got. Over its final 3 fiscal years, Forever 21 lost more than $400 million. In fiscal 2024 alone, it bled roughly $150 million. By the end, court documents showed the company's debts had grown to roughly 10 times the value of everything it owned. This wasn't a company in a rough patch. This was a company watching its entire reason for existing get eaten alive by a faster, cheaper version of itself. The founder's gas station hunch, the trend copying formula, the cheap clothes at scale magic trick, all of it had been weaponized and pointed straight back at them. By early 2025, there was nothing left to do but admit it. In March of 2025, Forever 21's U.S. operating company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy for the second time in 6 years. And this time, there would be no $81 million rescue. The company had spent months searching for a buyer. It reached out to more than 200 potential bidders. Dozens signed confidentiality agreements and took a serious look. Not one of them was willing to step in and save the business as a going concern. There was simply no sustainable path forward. So the wind down began. All 354 remaining U.S. stores were marked for liquidation. The bright yellow bags went into clearance bins. Those same store windows that once advertised the newest trends now ran a single final message. Everything must go. The shutdown came in waves. The first round, more than 200 of the weakest performing stores, was marked for closure in February. The rest followed weeks later. Gift cards were only honored until the middle of April, so anyone still holding store credit had a narrow window to spend it before it turned worthless. At the time of the filing, Forever 21 employed more than 9,000 people across the country, and the wind down put nearly all of those jobs on the line. By the end of April 2025, every Forever 21 store in America had closed its doors. The Los Angeles headquarters, the nerve center of the empire the Changs built from 900 square feet, was shut down. Hundreds of corporate workers lost their jobs, from managers to designers to the executives at the top. The brand name still technically exists, owned by others, and the international stores were a separate story. But the company that 2 immigrants built into a global giant, the one that taught America how to shop fast and cheap, was gone as an American operating business in a little over 10 weeks of closing sales. There's something almost poetic about how it ended. Forever 21 got beaten by its own idea, executed faster and cheaper than it could ever manage, by competitors operating under rules it couldn't access. The race to the bottom that Forever 21 helped start eventually reached a bottom even Forever 21 couldn't survive. Cheaper always wins in fast fashion, right up until you're the one who isn't cheapest anymore. Do-Won and Jin Suk Chang chased the American dream with $11,000 and caught it bigger than almost anyone. The dream just didn't come with a guarantee that it would last forever. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy videos like this, please feel free to like and subscribe for more.